A legendary Malay warrior of the 15th century was said to have rallied a cry.
Takkan Melayu hilang di dunia.
These words, believed to have been spoken by the legendary Malay warrior Hang Tuah, are forever etched in the Malay imagination. His weapon was the Keris, a dagger revered for its deadly and magical properties. Today, the Keris has survived over 5 centuries as a symbol of power and national pride for Malay people of all walks of life. As one of the oldest surviving objects of the Malay world, the Keris is much more than just a weapon. Each Keris is a key that grants us insights into the changing beliefs and traditions of a people. The Keris is a distinctive asymmetrical dagger indigenous to the Malay archipelago. Forged primarily from iron, the Keris was the weapon of choice amongst Malay warriors from around the 13th century. Much like the 6-shooters brandished by cowboys of the American frontier, a Malay man would rarely have been seen without his trusty Keris blade at his side.
Malay without Keris is just naked, like you naked. So every man during those days must wear Keris, even they are on their way to village or what.
To understand the significance of the Keris, one must first travel back in time to the days of the earliest Malay kingdoms.
From about 5,000 years ago, the Austronesian group moved from the north, from the Taiwan island, into the Philippines and into the Indonesian Malaysian archipelago. They were here settling down sometime around 3000, 2000 BC, and for that purpose they were already settled and having some agriculture. They have their boat construction and doing their fishing work, and at that time also they were settling along the coast of most of the island.
The culture of the Keris evolved out of the maritime kingdoms of the Indonesian islands of Java, Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, spreading to as far as the Philippines. These kingdoms formed an important part of the Malay world.
Malay world refers to an area from Madagascar right down to the Hawaii.
Over the centuries, with development of agriculture and increased maritime trade, the kingdoms of the Malay world flourished into maritime regional powers.
Traders from Sebuah went direct to China, but to the Middle East, they went through the Indian traders.
It was a world in which Malay seafarers sailed their vessels to ports on the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean.
By virtue of trading contacts with China, India and the Middle East.
Influenced by contact with neighbouring cultures, many of the Malay kingdoms adopted the Hindu religion. They were structured along the Hindu tradition of a king or Raja at the centre of concentric circles of power.
The basic character of the kingdom should be Hindu-Buddhist, and that would be the beginning of the government based on the belief system. But it is believed that the Malayan in Sumatra and the Hindu in Java, they were not totally like the Indian Hinduism or the Indian Buddhism, with slight change and modification due to local belief, the local shamanism, which was part and parcel of the religious system then anyway.
Adaptation from animist, Hindu and Buddhist beliefs resulted in a religious mixture or syncretism prior to the arrival of Islam. The vast majority of people kept their own local cults. Gradually, extreme forms of worship developed out of the cauldron of spiritual ideas. And the culture of the Keris grew out of this reality.
Tujuan Keris daun pandan ni luar dia punya tu pandan sarah ya. Pandan sarah ni ialah untuk dia orang makan darah. Maka apa kalau dia petikan, dia bersilap apa semua gitu ni buat tari dia gitu, maka ada celah dia ke mana-mana dia duk gitu. Maka duk untuk mengamakkan pada orang ramai untuk melawan, untuk naik dia punya darah, maka dia sangat gila. Makan darah dia letak di sini. Makan darah, kalau makan darah ni, kalau dia orang mabuk darah berapa ramai pun dia nampak seorang ya.
The connection between weapons, maybe Keris for that matter anyway, and the idea of the spirit world will be within the weapon, it is used to create a kind of power for the human being to cajole, to appease, to get the cooperation of the spirit world in order perhaps to cure from disease, or maybe to ward off evils, intention within the spirit world which may be trying to, I suppose, create some kind of chaos.
Now, when Islam came to the tip of the Sumatra island in 1292, we are told that the Achenese king, Teuku Ali, raised it up and said, "Praise be to God." It was never meant to thwart others or to use it as a utensil to kill in the first place.
For centuries, the Malays retained much of their earlier animist, Hindu and Buddhist beliefs held prior to the arrival of Islam in the 13th century. And aspects of these beliefs that were retained in the culture of the Keris were often rationalised into the Islamic worldview. The idea of the divine gift of iron, for instance, was easily translated into the Islamic sense. There is even a verse in the Holy Quran entitled Iron that says God brought down iron to test man's ability to use it for ill or for good. This spiritual approach to iron was readily accepted by the Malay ironsmiths. After all, the most prized material for making a Keris blade was meteorite iron. Meteorite iron has long been used in the creation of special Keris. Rich in iron ore, meteors enter Earth's atmosphere by the thousands every day. Emerging from the heavens, a meteor enters the Earth's atmosphere, burning up gases and space dust, causing a bright flash in the sky. In most traditional cultures, this was greeted as a sign from the god. People believed in the magical power of the Keris and those that possessed knowledge of that power. These powers granted the user all sorts of useful abilities, such as the power to heal, invincibility, and even the ability to fly. The Keris was often used for physical harm through supernatural practices, or what was once called tuju. In a tuju ritual, a pawan or shaman could kill from a distance. With the right invocations and spells, leaving one's footprints in the sand could be fatal. Having a life of its own, a special Keris could fly off on a killing spree. And a spiritually infused blade could warn its owner of danger by rattling in its sheath. Equally intriguing were tales that the Keris could transfer the sight of a blazing fire simply by pointing the tip of the blade to an alternative site. During colonial days in Malaysia, people were quoted to have seen fire from a burning shipping vessel transferred to the mainland simply with the use of a Keris. For centuries, tales of magical Keris have been passed down through the generations, carrying with them the drama of human tragedy reminiscent of those of Shakespeare. but probably none so dramatic and inspiring as the tragic story of Hang Tuah and Hang Jebat. Hang Tuah, the most illustrious warrior in Malacca, was the leader of a closely knit band of Malacca's finest warriors that included his childhood friend, Hang Jebat. As the Sultan's most trusted general, Hang Tuah was feared and respected throughout the Malay world, not least for his famed Taming Sari Keris. The Taming Sari Keris is probably the most treasured Keris of all time. It is purported to be bestowed with magic, and legend has it that whoever is in possession of the Keris would attain invincibility.
Dikatakan bahawa keris Taming Sari diperbuat daripada 20 jenis besi. Keris ini dipercayai mempunyai keserasian yang amat besar dan diperolehi oleh Hang Tuah.
A popular version of the legend is one where Hang Tuah is slandered by his enemies, and the Sultan Mansur Shah unthinkingly sentences him to death. Upon receiving his fate, Hang Tuah surrenders the Taming Sari Keris to the Sultan, a Keris that later finds its way into the hands of Hang Jebat. But Hang Tuah's death sentence was never carried out because his executioner, the Bendahara, defied the Sultan's orders and hid Hang Tuah in a remote region of Malacca. On hearing the false news of Hang Tuah's execution, Hang Jebat, in a fit of vengeful rage, ran amok at the royal palace, causing the Sultan to flee in fear of his life. With the Sultan's warriors unable to challenge the more skilled Hang Jebat, the Sultan laments the demise of Hang Tuah, the only warrior that would have been able to defeat Hang Jebat. Hearing this, the Bendahara informed the Sultan that Hang Tuah was in fact still very much alive. Pardoned by the Sultan, he is ordered to retake the Taming Sari and kill his lifelong friend. By the end of the grueling clash lasting 7 days, Hang Jebat, exhausted and exasperated by his opponent's skill and determination, gives up the Taming Sari and challenges Hang Tuah to finish the fight. Hang Jebat, the lifelong friend and confidant of Hang Tuah, slain by the very man whose death he avenged. Each Keris is a key that grants us insights into the changing beliefs and traditions of a people. A legendary Malay warrior of the 15th century was said to have rallied a cry.
Takkan layu hilang di dunia.
These words, believed to have been spoken by the legendary Malay warrior Hang Tuah, are forever etched in. Today, the Keris has survived over 5 centuries as a symbol of power and national pride for Malay people of all walks of life. As one of the oldest surviving objects of the Malay world, the Keris is much more than just a weapon. in the Malay imagination. His weapon was the keris, a dagger revered for its deadly and magical properties.